age. Hercules, born Al Alchaos, Alchaeus, and Alcides, Alcides, was the divine hero in Greek mythology, the son of Zeus, and El Alcimene, foster son of Apollyon. He was the great grandson and half-brother of Perseus. Hercules too. You shouldn't mess with friends of mine like multi-boxer George G. If you have a problem with him, then you got a problem with me. 48, you win. I don't want any more beef with you. been surviving in this lots of years ago. Surviving in this war. Go down. You will die, my enemy. In one direction, I think Hercules could be the best in fight. Hercules! What a finals they couldn't bring in as best as they can. It was 17 versus 18 fighters in this war. This was a battle. It was a stillness battle. It could be a 300. The 300 ninjas inside this battle. This is a war. But a back to the depths of Hades. Slay them to the ground. Slay them to the ground. On the board. Let's slay them. On the board. On the board. We slay them to the ground. Make sure they all die. my territory. You gonna die. Hold on. From the castle to the temple, these punks are going to die. They're going to die for a very long time. For Hercules. Yeah. Let's kill them all. Hercules died. We kill every last one. to slay them all. Of Olympus. Greek gods. To fight for a life or for war. Fight for a life or for war. You fight for a life and war. Time to slay them all. to pieces. Retreat the war. Retreat. People from New Zealand won the fight, won that war. It was a long fight away from the ancient times. You know, Hercules. Where's Hercules? Up they go. Die. That's Kratos. This is Kratos. No. Pussy. Where am I? Says here. It says here that you can add wood to a crane and make a shield of armor. Where's the castle? So I can find it. Nazareth. This is love. Ghost of Sparta. Where you are, man? Kratos. Blades of the Chaos. Blades of Chaos, Kratos. Nothing to lose, give it up. The king of Olympus, you will die for betraying the king. Fatality. Killed him for it. What the? Traitor. Korai. Kratos, the angry man. Yeah. Brutal kill. That's nasty. Ancient Sparta. What are you gonna do? Surprise me. Kratos, the king of the land, killing so many people. Can't blame Kratos. He likes to do what he likes to do, bro. Can't blame him for that. Yeah, even he said Kratos, the Greek mythology boy, loves to kill. Took my blade.
Θέλω λέγει λατρίδας. Θέλω 10 μονάδες. τους δεχόντες, έρωτα μόνον ηχεί. Ήλυψαν νεύρα πρωί και την ειρήνη άφησαν. Καγούμεν είδων άθλους Ηρακλέους, λυριδέρωτας αντεφών. Χαίρετε λοιπόν οι μήν ήρωες, οι λύροι γάρ μόνος έρωτας.
time to pay your tax for us. Hey, Kool-Aid. Spartan warrior. It's time to pay your tax and defense. Kratos. Hercules.
It's 427 BCE, and the worst internal conflict ever to occur in the ancient Greek world is in its fourth year. The Peloponnesian War is being fought between the city-states of Athens and Sparta, as well as their allies. The Athenians can't match the formidable Spartan army on land, so they've abandoned the countryside and moved inside the walls surrounding their city and port, now provisioned by a superior fleet and extensive maritime empire. The cramped conditions have taken a toll, and a recent plague wiped out a third of the population, but city life goes on. Archias and Dexalea live in the center of Athens. As a painter of high-class pottery, Archias is relatively well off and takes great interest in the city's affairs. Dexalea, on the other hand, can't participate in politics or own property. The couple are grateful to the gods that 3 of their 4 children, a son and 2 daughters, have survived past infancy. Many parents see daughters as a liability since they require dowries to find husbands, but Archias is confident that his wealth will allow him to make good matches for them without going bankrupt. Like many Athenians, the family owns slaves. Originally from Thrace, they were captured in war. Thrata does most of the housework and helps raise the children. Philon is a pedagogos who supervises the son's education, teaching him reading and writing. Archias is up early because there's a meeting of the ecclesia, the assembly of citizens, taking place at dawn. Before setting out, he burns incense and pours a libation at the small shrine in the courtyard on behalf of his entire household. Dexalea will remain at home all day, teaching her daughters domestic skills. Later, she'll retire to the inner courtyard for some fresh air. When Archias arrives at the Agora, the civic and commercial heart of the city, he finds the square swarming with his fellow citizens, native-born adult males who have completed military training. Attached to the central monument is a notice board with the meeting's agenda. Today there's only one item of discussion: what to do with the people of Mytilene. a city on the island of Lesbos, where a revolt against Athenian rule has just been put down. The meeting takes place on a hill west of the Acropolis, known as the Pnyx. The word means tightly packed, and the crowd of 5,000 citizens makes it clear why. The heralds purify the hill by sprinkling its boundary with pig's blood and call for order. As everyone sits on benches facing the platform, the presiding officer opens the meeting with the words, "Tis agoreten boulete," who wishes to address the assembly. One by one, citizens speak, some advising mercy, others bent on vengeance. A motion is proposed to execute all the Mytilenaeans and enslave their women and children because they betrayed their Athenian allies during a time of war. A majority raises their right hands in favor. Once the meeting's over, Archias heads back to the Agora to buy food and wine. Hundreds have gathered there to discuss the results, many unhappy with the decision. When Archias returns home, he tells Dexilea about the debate. She thinks that killing the innocent as well as the guilty is harsh and counterproductive, and tells him as much. Around dusk, Archias goes to a friend's house for a symposium. The 9 men drink wine and discuss the meeting well into the night. Archias shares his wife's opinion, urging mercy, and his friends eventually agree. Before dawn, something unprecedented happens. Heralds circulate throughout Athens, announcing the council has called another meeting. The second debate is equally heated, but a new resolution, to execute only the leaders of the revolt, narrowly passes. Yet there's a problem. A ship with orders to carry out the first resolution was dispatched the previous day. And so another ship quickly sets sail to countermand the order. A race of democracy against time. Did you enjoy this glimpse of daily life in an ancient civilization? If so, check out our Day in the Life playlist.
Ancient hero gets too full of himself, thinking he's invincible, and only realizes that he's not invincible when he's already been impaled and or disintegrated? Well, Athenian history is a grade A example of how hubris can make and break you. So let's get into it. Greek culture in its earliest forms has been around for a good long while, between Minoan Crete and later Mycenaean Greece. In the 400 years after the Bronze Age came crashing down, people had forgotten what writing was, so the Greeks kept themselves busy by telling each other stories out loud about how awesome the Trojan War was. When they finally remembered what writing was in the 700s or 800s, they decided to write it all down. Around the same time, they also remembered how to build big shiny societies. And a bunch of different villages and towns built themselves up and each became what's called a polis. A polis, or city-state, is an autonomous society organized around a city and its neighboring farmland and has its own government. And this government worked by having all the rich adult male landowners get together to vote and decide on stuff. Aha, you may say, this is because Athens invented democracy, right? To that, I say no, for 2 reasons. 1, Athens had not invented democracy yet, but also 2, they're a complete nobody at this point in history. They're like barely a tier 2 polis on the coolest polis list. The big boys at this point in time are places like Sparta, Argos, Corinth, and Thebes, not Athens. But while every polis did have public voting, those systems looked much more like an aristocracy or an oligarchy than a democracy. Democracy didn't come around until about 200 years later when, yes, Athens invented it. And in a Greek context, this means that Athens drastically lowered the property qualifications for citizenship, so a much larger share of the population could vote. But even most Athenians were put off by having so many people involved in the decision-making process, and they expressed it because Athens was notoriously self-critical, especially in the time around the Peloponnesian War. Almost all of the famous Athenian playwrights, and especially the popular satirist playwright Aristophanes, reveled in critiquing Athenian society, and addressing important social issues in dramatic and comedic ways. But remember, back to history, at the turn of the 5th century, Athens is still pretty much irrelevant at this point. Things would change as a result of Persian expansion from, well, Persia into western Anatolia, where a lot of ethnic Greeks lived. And much like an excellent assortment of ice cream, there are a bunch of different flavors of Greek, but you might be familiar with 2, Ionian and Dorian, like the columns. Dorian Greeks mainly lived in the Peloponnese and considered Sparta their quasi-mother city. Ionian Greeks lived in, well, Ionia, aka Western Anatolia, and they viewed Athens as their quasi-mother city. So when Persia did what all empires do and expanded outwards into Anatolia, the Ionians did what subjects do and revolted. The Athenians, being the good mother city they were, went to help. They failed to defeat the Persians, but they succeeded in making them angry, which, now that I think about it, is probably worse. As a result, the Persian king Darius decided, alright, screw those guys, I'm going to sail right over to Athens and deliver a strongly worded letter expressing my disapproval. And to make sure he got the point across, he also sent along his army, which might be the more relevant factor at play here. So Darius sent 25,000 of his most heavily armed mailmen to the coast of Marathon, where the Athenians met them for battle. By all accounts, the Persians should have easily beaten the Athenians and gone over to take over Greece, but the Athenians played the waiting game, and when the Persian cavalry was away, probably playing polo, the Athenians attacked, enveloping the Persians and winning the battle. This came as a surprise to the rest of Greece, as next to no one was expecting a dinky little polis like Athens to be able to beat Persia in a fight. So Athenian prestige shot up massively overnight. 7 years later, the Athenian silver mines on the tip of Attica struck it big, and the general Themistocles said, let's use some of that silver money to build a fleet just in case the Persians come back. I have a feeling it'll come in handy. And then the Athenians agreed to build a fleet. Then, 3 short years later, the Persians marched across the Hellespont into Thrace and around to central and southern Greece. Now, Greece had over 200 decent-sized poleis and 500 smaller ones, but only 31 allied to fight against the Persians. 31! That is not a lot! Most Greeks were happy to let the Persians come on in and conquer Greece, probably on the basis that it's less exercise than fighting. And some states, like Thebes, went above and beyond to get on the Persians' good side and allied with them. Fun. The Spartans, who led the resistance against Persia because, come on, they're Sparta, used Greece's mountainous geography to their advantage and looked for a narrow place where the Persians' superior numbers wouldn't be able to help them. And that place was Thermopylae, which literally means the hot gates. And with all those Spartans in one place, I have to say that's a fair assessment. The Spartans fought their hardest, but ultimately lost because of MLG hacks. But while the Spartans were fighting at Thermopylae, Athens and friends were fighting a naval battle against the Persians at Artemisium, just off the coast. This is important because the Greeks needed to stop the Persian navy too. If the army breaks through, that's game over, but if the navy can just sail behind wherever the Spartans are hunkered down, all the phalanxes in the world couldn't save them. That's why it was super important to keep the Persian army and navy separated, because the ancient trireme ships needed to dock regularly to remain in good fighting shape. The battle was ultimately a draw, but that was all they needed. It had bought the Athenians enough time to evacuate their city, which was promptly sacked, and then all head to the Isthmus of Corinth, another Thermopylae-type passage. The Spartan army camped out in the pass, and the Athenians took their ships to the island of Salamis. The next battle was it for the Greeks. If either the army or the navy lost, it was all over. Again, the Greeks were saved by a combination of their home turf, as well as the Athenians planning years ahead for this exact eventuality. Greek tactics at the Battle of Salamis led to a decisive victory on the sea, and the entire Persian fleet went on what I'll say was a 2,000-year scuba diving trip, to put it gently, and the bulk of the Persian army retreated. The next summer, Athens and Sparta fought Thebes and Persia in the Battle of Plataea, just north of Attica, and thanks to about a third of the Persian army just straight up bailing for reasons that completely elude me, the Greeks were able to win and kick the Persians out for good. And remember, this was the work of just 31 cities, and even still, most of that legwork was done by Athens and Sparta. It's after this that Athens starts feeling pretty good about themselves, and still congratulating themselves on excellent foresight and planning, decided to create a league of Greek states to fight the Persians in the event that they come back a third time. Recognizing itself as a budding naval power, Athens opted to ride the waves and collect all of the various islands in the Aegean under its wing. Or, maybe its sail. Not wanting to do all of the work themselves, Athens asked that everyone pay into a collective defense fund with either ships or money. The money was kept on the sacred island of Delos, hence its name, the Delian League. This started out all nice and good, but Athens started to feel a little too good about itself and kept stretching its arms across Greece, roping in more allies and treating them increasingly harshly, forcing them to pay higher tributes, establishing democracies by force, and confiscating large amounts of allied land. Oh, and did I mention that they used the treasury money to fund the construction of shiny temple buildings that offered zero strategic benefit in the event of a Persian invasion? Oh, and also that they moved the treasury money into those fancy buildings that they spent the treasury money on? Yeah, because they did that. Also, did I forget that they maybe might have quietly struck a deal with Persia to get them not to invade anymore, validating the entire point of the whole empire? Alliance. Why did I say that? Silly me. So yeah, this was pretty great for Athens and its Athenian empire, but pretty crap if you were anyone else. Meanwhile, Sparta was totally minding its own business, honestly not caring at all about Athens' imperialistic shenaniganery, up until the precise moment that Athens allied with Argos, one of Sparta's oldest enemies. That got them a little bit annoyed, and by a little I mean very much. So Athens and Sparta entered into a 15-year Cold War of sorts, after which they made a 30-year peace treaty that lasted only 15 years. Again, this war didn't happen because Athens was acting like an evil empire, but they totally were, on several counts. Sparta didn't care about that. It was that Athens was butting into Sparta's sphere of influence by aggravating Sparta and her allies in several ways. At this point, Athens had gone mad and war was inevitable. The problem was that, unlike in the Persian War, each city had no intention of directly attacking the other. Sparta was protected by how far into the Peloponnese it was, and Athens, though somewhat exposed, had built long walls to the Piraeus harbor, ensuring its maritime supply chain couldn't possibly be broken. So each side pursued a different strategy. Sparta wanted to draw Athens out into an open battle and crush them, being the kick-ass Spartan soldiers that they were. Athens, meanwhile, had no intention of fighting Sparta at all, and was content to wait until the Spartans got bored and ended the war. The difficulty for this strategy was that Sparta was really smart, and every summer they went out to Attica and destroyed a bunch of farmland around the coast in plain view of the city, hoping to bait Athens into a fight. Athens, I've got to give it to them, held really strong. They watched farms that their families had worked for decades and generations get completely destroyed, but they still didn't fight. Instead, a lot of fighting took place on the periphery, as both sides would poke and prod at each other's allies. There were a lot of small battles in the first phase of the war, but I'll mention 3 in some detail because they're important, as well as being good stories. First is the multi-year-long Theban siege of Plataea, otherwise known as the Ninja Ramp War. So in 431, Thebes decided to go stomp on innocent little Athenian ally Plataea, and the story is a little ridiculous, so bear with me. First, the Thebans send in 300 ninjas, yes, basically ninjas, into the city after dark, tasked with bringing Plataea into a Theban alliance, by force if necessary. The ninjas were ultimately discovered and the entire town erupted into a hilarious melee with those Theban ninjas, killing them all. Then, Thebes attempted to siege the city outright and built an earthen mound, or a dirt ramp, over the walls. So the Plataeans cut a hole in their wall and dug out the dirt, so the Thebans threw on more dirt, and then the Plataeans dug out the dirt from under the ramp, and then the Thebans threw on even more dirt, and then the Plataeans built a second wall inside the original wall, and eventually the Thebans said, alright, screw this, and brought over Sparta, and the two of them built a moat around the town in an attempt to starve it into submission. Plataea ultimately appealed to history, arguing that Thebes was evil for siding with the Persians at the Battle of, remember, Plataea, at the end of the Second Persian War. Sparta's harsh pragmatism then took over, and they asked the Plataeans, well okay, but what have you done for us in this war? To which the Plataeans had no answer, and in short order the city was razed to the ground after 4 long years of fighting. Now that is cold. If you thought Sparta was the good guy in this war, you are unfortunately mistaken. If you also thought that Sparta was any good at sailing, you are quite sorely mistaken there as well. The battles of Naupactus both illustrate how the Spartans, despite far superior numbers, are complete crap at naval warfare. In the first battle, the Spartans adopted a ridiculous formation and the Athenians beat them. And in the second battle, an Athenian ship pulled off what amounts to a trick shot, and the Spartan rowers all dropped their oars in shock, allowing the Athenians to beat them in the ensuing confusion. Thankfully, history makes at least this one easy for us. Spartans are pretty much only good on land, and Athenians are pretty much only good at sea. Partially explains why the war was so damn long. And finally, in 425, a series of basically accidents led to Athens winning a strategically important battle on Spartan soil. So some Athenians were tooling around on the west coast of Peloponnese on their way to do something else, and a storm forced them to stop. The general Demosthenes, who also later appears in the Sicilian expedition, insisted on docking and encamping at Pylos. Sparta, panicking, sent soldiers and ships to the Bay of Pylos in an attempt to kick them out. Athens won the naval battle, obviously, and the Spartans on land retreated. Except for the poor sods who happens to be stationed on this island over here and had no way of escaping. The Athenians shot arrows at the defenseless Spartans and famously took 120 of them as live captives. This had a strategic effect on the war too, as it gave Athens the leverage to stop Sparta from running up to Attica every year to wreck their farmland, which was really helpful. Sparta, recognizing their moment of weakness here, offered peace. Athens, of course, refused on the basis of, no, we want more stuff. So much for peace. A few years later, Sparta wised up and attacked Athens where it mattered most, their navy. They headed up to the northern city of Amphipolis, which was Athens' link to their supply of timber and silver, both of which were essential to shipbuilding. Athens tried to get it back, but they failed, so they reluctantly agreed to a 50-year peace treaty. Okay, take a guess. How many years do you think this 50-year peace deal is going to last? This is so stupid. 3 years! That's it! 3! Not even kidding! This was because Athens allied with Argos. Again. And Sparta got real angry about it. Again. And this time they won a resulting battle. So, again, so much for that peace, huh? Psst. Hey, Athens. Do us a favor and recognize when to stop. Then, 3 short years later, Athens launched its wonderfully disastrous Sicilian expedition, which I discuss at length in this video about my all-time favorite historical troublemaker, Alcibiades. It also covers most of the rest of the war, so I'm going to fast forward through that for the sake of time. In 405, Persia, of all people, allied with Sparta, because they were probably getting annoyed and
Annoyed, eh? See. The real army. He's a real enemy. Fighting. Yeah. Koray. Slay them all! Hey, Koray! You know what? 3. Let's slay them into pieces. Slay them into pieces. deserve to die. That's why we hate you so much. We won the fight. Few more. Korai. One left to kill. Yeah! Korai! Many had to retreat this war. Hercules, the son of Zeus, Hercules. This is Hercules, please. This looks like Hercules' place. Place of Romans and Greeks. tried to kill the wrong one. Oh, Mr. Chunk Boy tried to kill him. And to kill him for good. Hey! Where's Hercules? After you people, we've removed these two criminals from the society. And just of the rule at this time, we are willing to release one of them back to you. Will have you release Robin, who stands accused of trolling. Or would you prefer release Kratos, who secured Salem for life? Release Robin. His crimes are innocent compared to Kratos. It's Kratos who should be released. We don't need people like Robin. The inside vote lies with me. I say Kratos should be released and let Robin suffer. Very well, the people have spoken. And it is Kratos will be returned to you, people. These savages deserve face of certain death against the others beasts in the arena. He's gonna face eternal death. He's gonna face horrible death in where the Roman Colosseum. Athenian. Die fighting the empire, then live under it. Could I join your rebellion? I'm ready to fight, Kratos. I've got your back if you got mine. Potion makes him drunk. The wine. Potion. Kratos, the king warrior in Athens. Where's the sword? Hey Kratos, I saw you throw that leaf. Stop throwing things or I throw you around. Right, boy. You ever been to this side of the mountain? The warriors here! For the kingdom of heaven is approaching. You like to get those you are ready to receive the Holy Spirit. Is wise.
Καταγέαν άπασαν ένδοξον διότι γλυκερό εσφλών ο πάζης.
It's the warriors. Hey, what you doing? Blades of territory. Blades of territory. You won't win. You picked the wrong fight, Kratos. In the journey, you have to say about thee. The court got arrested by the Romans. See how the Roman Empire looks after your people. We've removed these two criminals from the society. As the gesture of goodwill at this time, we are willing to release one of them back to you. Would you have us release Lundia, who stands accusing of rape? Prefer release Kratos. Athens. Drive on. Efficient compared to Kratos. That's why you need to keep your mouth shut, Athens bastard. Athens pricklehead bastard. You don't know what to say. We're the Spartans. The Spartan rules. It's Kratos who should be released. We don't need people like Olympia. Olympia. The right for citing the vote lies to me, and I say Linda should be relieved. Let Kratos suffer. Alright, people have spoken, and it's Linda who should be relieved. Still have my weapon, that's why. Hope is worth it, Kratos. Let's see how much trouble you can cause now. Yeah. You didn't even take off my blades off my hand to make sure I'm no longer a threat. Could just do that first before putting me in jail. These Roman prick bastards. You will die. You will die. I've got some money. Get over here, Parker, so I can give you a handshake. The Roman prison. They call it the Roman prison. Give me a handshake, boy. Ancient temple. The ancient Greek Roman temple. Would you say about me to be relieved? You know, don't change the subject. Trying to get rid of me this time. You should die. is new. Lot more better. Another war broke out. Another war broke out. We have the Native Americans. Europeans versus Native Americans. Two more left in this fight, in this battle. You gotta survive in this battle. Let's keep battling. We fight our own battles to win. Long day for a horrific war. Eight units survived. Hercules was here. Hercules 2. Kratos days. Hercules 2. Kratos. He has his giant. Emails. Period of time. He still lives even when he died. The great battle, great battles of Zeus times, Hercules times, the great battle of Hercules times. Creature, two-headed dragons. Two-headed dragons. The Pele Kilo. The deal pot. The Paleo. Paleo. Into it. Picture of Hercules, ancient Greek mythology. defeating two-headed dragons. After Hercules. Hercules. Greek mythology. Hercules, mostly Spartan. Hercules, mostly Spartan. Mesopotamian. Because as he was defeating creatures. British Museum. Long ago for what? And it's a lot of war. Hercules. Defeating the Medusa. Thebes, Egypt. This picture must be over hundreds of years ago. Thebes, Egypt. Greek mythology. Macedonia, Greece. Next, Sparta, Antony, Thebes. All right here. They were fighting and fighting until the war was all over across sea. They were fighting and fighting across sea until the war was already over. This man, Hercules. This man, Hercules. We'll never forget him. The Hercules Hercules. History lives. I are doing. John Minos.